I guess we're recording now. Here we go. I would like to bring this meeting of the regular meeting of the Board of Commissioners, Humboldt Bay Harbor Recreation and Conservation District. It is June 8th. I welcome you all, and I'd like to call to order and a roll call, Chris, please.
Commissioner Higgins. Commissioner Benson.
Here.
President Dale.
Here.
Commissioner Coleman.
Present.
Commissioner Newman.
Here.
All right, pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. All right, Ryan, report on closed session.
There was no reportable action taken during closed session.
Very well. All right, we're going to go to, at this point in our agenda, we have a public comment period where people can comment on items not on the agenda. If you would like to speak on items that are not agendized here, please step up to the podium, state your name, where you're from, and carry on. Seeing none, we're going to move on to consent calendar.
Make a motion to adopt the consent calendar. Second.
I have a motion and a second. No, nothing's being pulled. So I will ask for a vote. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Number 9, communications reports and correspondence received.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I want to confirm with the audience that they can hear us.
Oh, please do so.
John Steinbeck, can you hear us? Or Scott?
Well, Scott couldn't hear us because he can't comment. The only person that could comment would be.
Oh, that's true.
Because he's here to report.
That's true.
The rest of the participants would be able to. John will have to be a co-host in order for him to be able to speak on the item.
Excuse us while we figure out technical details.
John Steinbeck, can you hear us? You can unmute yourself.
Do you have it on the screen up here or?
We can actually see the people.
Audio is working fine online.
Yeah, sometimes vacation. Well, we can continue. If they can hear it, then we're good to go.
Correspondence received.
Correspondence received, please.
We received 3 items today that are in response to item 10A of unfinished business. Provided, there's copies for the public there. There are some packets handed out. The earlier items they would be added as supplemental to the agenda.
And we also have a letter regarding Roy Fearless's celebration of life happening next weekend at 2 p.m. at Fortuna Rodeo Fair. Many of you guys may or may not know, Roy was commissioner on this board for, I don't know, a century. And he was my friend and my mentor on the board. He is the one who asked me to be on the board. He has big shoes to fill, and he was an absolute incredible man. Human being that like no other. Good stories, and a hell of a baseball player. So I'm sure that the celebration will be just that celebration. So you're all welcome to go if you'd like to go. Good man. All right. Executive Director's report.
The Director Auditor is absent tonight. Been gone and report us for that as they would typically. So the Army Corps dredge Ephions has completed its bar and entrance dredging on May 26th. The channel depths are mainly uniform at 46 feet. There are progress surveys. One may have shown up on the Army Corps website just this afternoon. It will be posted. Bar pilots were able to remove the draft restriction at the moment. So now we've got the Quinnet has come in, done dredging, got up in the federal channel, here in the Eureka channel, the Ephions in the barn entrance, called B&E, and finally the West Coast Hopper dredge is down to remove 300,000 cubic yards. I believe that it left the East Coast just yesterday or the day before. The survey vessel for the wasn't here in Humboldt, so to occur. Pretty exciting stuff. We had a very successful dredge season. It's just a simple note to everybody that the bar pilots were able to lift the draft restriction. This is good news. This past week, there was a bit of a panic call from Green Diamond. They had a ship that could not commit until they knew the draft restriction was lifted. So at this point, the vessels can load a draft 38 feet based on the 6 foot high. So great news for us. This is becoming from the facility side of the world, been a lot of training with Humboldt Bay Fire. I've heard or seen the fireboat out with Bonnie Gould off with some fire engine. A lot of water in the last few days during Commissioner Newman. I just want to give a special thanks to David Turner, Bay Fire. He's trainings. Their engine crews that participated, their fireboat is Commissioner Newman, Leroy's really involved. That's how it appears on the email. So I use that as my source document.
That's how it appears on my email.
So in any event, so I wanted to acknowledge he was also signed off as the captain of the week, and then district facility staff. Good stuff there. And that's the end of my report. I'll pass it over to
Thank you. May 8th to 10th, Director Ocker and I and 2 board members were able to attend the Pacific Offshore Wind Summit in Sacramento. And while there, the opportunity to county economic development branch side meeting. A number of companies from Norway that presented our wind project at that. They came to me afterwards and said, hey, we have a conference in 2 weeks and we'd like you to participate. They offered to cover a lot of the expenses, the county, the rest of the expenses. So less than 2 weeks notice, off and away. So just show you a couple of quick pictures and some of the things that I learned. So it was the Floating Wind Days 2023. I just captured this conference in Norway. Norway is the global leader right now in floating offshore wind. Population 6 million people. The country is currently 99% renewable energy, almost entirely hydroelectric, and they've been doing another 30 gigawatts of offshore wind in the state of California. And going to be a net exporter of renewable energy. Amazing place. It was an incredible opportunity. It was really fast. It was in and out. The conference, the first 2 days took place on a boat, really high capacity, really nice ship. Had a big viewing deck at the top. There was this screen in the front. So there was presentations as we were going. It's really a great experience. Just the ship rides along for the first 2 days. Went to the first 2 floating offshore wind turbines in the world. So that one is a start. They are manufacturing these in fjords with really deep natural drafts, so they can do a different kind of floating foundation than we can. So that yellow part is 4 times deeper. It's got a helicopter landing pad. The one in the background is a different kind of foundation. And I got an opportunity to view multiple import manufacturing facilities. Nice scientific buoy systems. This is a floating offshore substation that's being manufactured there in the floating. So that's the turbines to this floating substation. And then also visited a site that's currently Europe's largest strip mine for gravel. And once they get this down to the base level, it's right next to the water. It will be a project very simple. And then we also stopped by a recreation Nordic biking village, which was really fun. And the conference itself.
Gotcha. Put the time in it, make it happen.
It's important to recognize. The foods, right? Had about 6 hour layover here in home. Time to get some clean clothes, help his family.
She's probably thanking us for sending you away, but we'll let you believe what you want to do. Very good. District council and district. Commissioners. Commissioner Bittner. Sure.
You see, I met with some folks from university and regular meetings, and I'll be reaching out to other commissioners as well, just looking for event meetings. Those are the things that are active. With them, also we call from Leroy's early today, once again, it's on that Saturday. Responsibility of the to be engaged in it. We've had some conversations with Chris, and since then, I'm going into details of it. It's a continuing issue for us as engineers, to find ways to set. Develop our ordinance, how we respond to the HSX and law enforcement, and kind of assuage the fears of folks who live in things like homes and businesses reach. We can work to report on that. There's police law enforcement is out there and typically folks there.
Yeah, just everybody. We're using a device tonight with a difference called the owl. It got a message. During the meeting, certainly. The device is right, and pretty sure the microphone, don't feel like they're hearing us. Want to make sure that everybody knows that's the microphone. And we can speak up just a little bit more.
Okay, I'll talk directly into the microphone now. That is this instead of our old microphones?
This is a temporary.
Okay.
One last thing, I also received communication from Supervisor Natalie Arroyo, the supervisor, saying my division district sheriff, and so we communicate from time to time, but she's asked me to participate with her in the radio 16th of June. Radio show, but I want to check in with the district as a harbor division. Anything else? And so, I want to make sure, I don't know how that works as a new commissioner, whether I need permission to the district, regional, what the questions are going to be, and I don't know how much you put on me or how much freedom I have to represent the harbor.
This is America. You're free to speak your mind. You can't represent the district. You're free to say whatever you like on this thing. Right? Represent your vote on the district. Yes, or your opinion.
My position.
Yeah.
But not the district itself. Yeah, understood. Thank you. I'll let
Well,
you know.
you can speak for Greg and agree.
Okay,
Everybody else seems to.
I'll let you know specifically.
Oh, let's know what it is, so I can, so we should do. Yeah. That's it. Yep, thank you. Commissioner Coleman.
Not representing the public district. They're set with disturbingly like between two terms. I was kind of concerned what sort of interview it was gonna be, but that was representing my position. Celebrating our community. Doing a lot of work on, trying to bring incentives and rebates and a lot of programs to different. I usually don't talk about how to do it. Looks like here in at River Coast Energy Authority in Humboldt, we're going to be administering a statewide rural regional energy network. Rural regions throughout the state to bring energy efficiency and more benefits to their utility. I'm really excited about it, and it's an honor that it's pretty much all these other regions. It's either honor or we didn't step up, and that we're going to be. Scandinavia, the kinetic sculpture race, which is one of the recreational activities that happens in the Bay here. And, I know we've talked about having a recreational demonstrations. See that place. I think there's so many recreational activities and users of the Bay that's uses your there are hundreds of people out in the Bay watching.
Well, mainly since we were salmon fishing in the spring, we've been doing the job with the captain. Actually brought the Bridgeport survey vessel up last Monday. Interesting trip on the ocean. We used to go in 7 miles an hour, and I go 20 miles an hour. It seemed like light speed until I got to Mendocino. It turned into we're gonna make it, but anyway, it all worked out fine. So that is the survey vessel looking at this for the Bridgeport and some of the important should be here soon. We did it the last 3 Tuesday, Wednesday mornings, we at 9 and every 10:30 branches. And we're to one rock. We stretched 4-inch hose from the fireboat to the fire truck, and we were able to completely charge the fire truck full capacity by 80-foot stream from their gun. At the same time, we could run both of our guns full capacity. And according to the little meter, we were burning 60 gallons an hour of fuel. Just so you know, Mr. Director. Practice is thirsty. That works out. And tomorrow morning, if anyone wants to check it out, you can the last 2 weeks. It's been really fun to see how things work with the fire department, making sure the boats lot of things to figure out. The idea is, if there's a fire or a loss of power in town, they can't get water. Pipings, we can supply fire trucks from quite a distance. And that's a situation. It could really save some. I have to say, the fire boat's getting old.
Okay. You need to grow a mustache. You can get hair. Say it.
Humboldt captain.
That might be interesting. People can't hear you.
Hey,
If I can speak up any more than I am now, but that's about it for me.
all right. I don't have a whole lot to report. I did a radio interview with Patrick on his Monday morning show on Monday. It was enjoyable. We talked about the holidays, all the things that are going on. We talked about the weather, and the ocean, and how our this season is different from. It almost feels like old days. We haven't had the wind in the afternoon yet, so it's not good. But yeah, I don't have much else to report. I guess we will move on to item 10. 10A. Consider adopting resolution 2023-12, a resolution certifying an environmental impact report previously certified by the County of Humboldt, adopting a mitigation, monitoring, and reporting program, and making findings relative to and approving Harbor District Permit 2023-12 with conditions for the Humboldt Bay Master Water Intake. Yeah.
Right. Chair. Strapping this is a long one.
All right. Speak up, because I think people have a hard time hearing us.
You got it. All right, so just for your knowledge, on May 2nd, not sharing screen.
I don't know if it would help, but I think that's a close.
Yeah, sorry, I don't know where. Okay, so starting over here. So for your knowledge, May 2nd, the district did a notice of public meeting for this particular item. And what that means is that you have a couple of options. You're going to be able to approve what's before you, deny what's before you, or continue to against it. Just be aware of that. And start at the end, and I'll conclude at the end here. Staff recommendation is to receive this report, receive public comments, and adopt Harbor District Resolution 2023-12, which would certify the environmental impact report previously certified by the County of Humboldt, adopt a mitigation monitoring reporting program, specifically for our action, adopt findings relative to the permit application for the Harbor District, and approve permit for district to an alternative recommendation is to receive the report, receive public comment, and continue to a date certain. So some key background information. For at least 10 years, the district's been envisioning and planning for a master bay water intake system to support land-based aquaculture. So today I found a presentation that was presented to the board in 2013. And among the strategic goals that the board entertained at the time was expansion of aquaculture. And in that same presentation to the board, that's visioning of a Humboldt Aquaculture Innovation Center. And these slides from 2013, visioning a national marine research and innovation with a public cargo dock, shore energy production, marine research, aquaculture. Just as a side note, notice that the district 10 years ago, this thing. It's what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about. So 10 years, the district has been envisioning this. For the past 2.5 years, the district has been pursuing permits for a master intake system to support. This project requires a harbor district permit because the district is a regulatory agency. Powers derived from the state harbor navigation code. And when it comes to big projects like this, there's a sequence of approvals. So you have to do local permits before you can finalize them. Get your state permits approved, federal permits approved for state. Just to demonstrate that there's actually regulations that says the U.S. Marine Corps of Engineers cannot approve their permits until all of it. So we are right now, there's a sequence of things talking about. Speaking of local permits, there's also an EIR. I'll talk more about this in minutes. Some project documents that are available to you in part of the staff report. Primary one is the project description for this project. That's attached to your staff report. And it has a lot of attachments to it. Another project document that was part of your staff report is the intake assessments. There's a little title there, but this was just recently published district website in May. And this one's critical to the overall project, so we'll be revisiting that. And then we have the EIR, which you can find on the county website, board.gov, projects, access, find the EIR and then draft the EIR. And I've referenced a lot of those documents. There's links to those in the staff. Things to know about the EIR, which the state clearinghouse. It is a dual applicant EIR prepared to cover the Nordic project and the district proposed master intake system. So we are a co-applicant. That's the official name of the CEQA document. The County of Humboldt is the CEQA lead agency. The district is responsible for the water intakes and portions of the project that are within the harbor district's regulatory jurisdiction. And the county and Nordic are responsible for the County Planning Commission unanimously certified that EIR as 422 and at the same time certified a coastal development. That decision was appealed to the county board of supervisors, who then voted unanimously to uphold the planning commission's decision. Harbor District's a responsible agency under CEQA for the project. It's obligated to review and consider information contained in the EIR. Responsible agency is responsible for mitigating or avoiding only those direct and indirect effects of the project that we carry out finance for. So you'll notice in your staff report that the resolution is really focused on the project that was your responsibility. So mitigation monitoring reporting plan or MMP provides the mitigation measures identified in the EIR which mitigate or avoid the direct or indirect effects of those parts of the project that should carry out. Our resolution adopts the MMP as an exhibit A. Looks like this. Under Public Resources Code, For each significant environmental effect of the project, the district has to make specific findings, brief rationale for each finding, which is done in the resolution. The district permit, I'm going to go over in more detail in a moment. That appears as Exhibit A2 to the resolution. All right, so let's talk about the project. Project proposes improvements to existing water intake structures at 2 sites. And I want to emphasize there that this is existing intake structures. We've got one in RMT2 dock. I'll show some maps. Red tank dock. They were operated by a pulp mill from around 1966 until approximately 2008. The project improvements to the existing system include new pumps, new modernized intake screens, and modernized piping and manifold systems. I'll show you maps. Operations of the project include bay water withdrawal and pumping to manifolds and specific components to water. Will be operated and maintained as a single system and feed into a common manifold and distribution system. And will be designed such that one intake can operate alone, the other intake is. And we will manage the water supply to tenants in compliance with various permits, including this permit you're hearing tonight, Coastal Commission Coastal Development Permit, and water permits. Water will be withdrawn through this common maintained system in 3 phases. Phase 1 is anything between 0 and 694 gallons per minute. Phase 2 is between 695 and 1,250 gallons per minute. And phase 3 exceeds 1,250 gallons to 8,200. All right, so maybe pause here to say something I should have said right at the beginning. Part of my staff report will include Sharon Creamer, who is a consultant with HT Harvey, and John Steinbeck, who is the that report I showed earlier with presentation today. We're available here. All right, so let's look at the project piping. So this map is a part of the packet that's submitted to you. And there's an awful lot going on here with the legend. So I'll simplify that. I'll show you the parts that we understand piping. On the property, there is a tank that is 12 feet. It's called red tank. Right off of that is what we call red tank. And the red tank now is an intake system. I'll show you what that looks like. That red tank dock has existing piping that's red that comes down in this alignment. The water intake system has piping as well. This will be revitalized and modernized, and they will share a common trench. So you can see that red means that it's 2 different sources of water and a common trench. We follow that. Here's our just really what we is the bay water. So we're going to follow that trench, goes along an existing roadway, and goes down here. Look at this, and let's go to the stormwater feature. And then here is the other intake system. This is the RMT2 dock. The blue star is the RMT2 dock. And there's more information in staff report if you want information. Here's a couple of things. Staff report also provides detail about the existing sea chests. Locations I just showed. Project describes eelgrass avoidance. So during the installation and maintenance of intake systems, qualified biologists will be present to monitor and avoid impacts to eelgrass. Installation activities will comply with eelgrass protection practices. Another part of the project is aquatic species and training and habitat restoration. So there's some site habitat restoration and offset reduction phase biological activity. This is based on agency consultation. And a whole section on this, number of attachments. So the Harbor District's going to complete offsite habitat restoration activities to offset the impact to biological activity as a result of entrainment. So I'll show you in detail what that looks like, what that means. And to compensate for the potential take of longfin smelt. So that compensatory offsite habitat restoration includes pile removal and will be implemented in association with phase 2. All right, so let's look at the phases in mitigation and restoration. So phase 1, consistent with other intake permits throughout Humboldt Bay, doesn't include any mitigation. This small amount of water is considered. Phase 2, Harbor District will compensate for project-related impacts to longfin smelt by implementing a mitigation measure outlined in the secret document, mitigation measure file 6A, and I'll show you more about that shortly. And this will be coordinated through coordination with California Department of Fish and Wildlife with an incidental take permit and the Coastal Commission. Working with the local permit. State. Under conditions of approval. Phase 3 mitigation includes completing that entrainment study in coordination with DFW. As well as the pilot. This is coordinated through those 2 states. So is this the first intake system in Humboldt Bay? No. Here's a list of other permits that are other projects that intake water in Humboldt Bay that have approved operation. You can just see an example of this. And for instance, one is this site here. System, another approved CDP that's not yet operational right now. Right, this is a little academic here, but I think this provides some much needed context. So we're withdrawing water from the bay. Let's talk about relative volume of that to the rest of it. So on this map, you can see 2 red stars there. Those are the 2 intake systems. And several times a day, water is going to be withdrawn from these 2 systems while simultaneously the bay is transitioning from high tide to low tide, and so water is leaving the bay. And then the systems withdraw water, that will switch and water will enter the bay going from low tide to high tide. Then it happens again, and almost complete cycle again. So if we look at average 24-hour period, and the bay is at high tide, average high tide, and we start at midnight, over the course of 6 hours and 12.5 minutes, the bay will go from high tide to low tide. And this system will withdraw 3 million gallons at its peak, at the peak of phase 3, withdraw 3 million gallons of water from the bay during that 6 hours. In that same period of time, the bay will go from 42.5 billion gallons of water. And the water will leave, go into the ocean, down to low tide, and 17 billion, 105 million gallons will move through tide into the ocean. Or at least that's how much would have left if we weren't withdrawing from the system. Since we're withdrawing 3 million gallons, it's only 17 billion, 102 million gallons. And the bay will balance out at 25 billion gallons. So just for context of how big these numbers are, 17 billion gallons is what leaves the bay from high tide to low tide, while we're growing 3 billion gallons. That is that ratio there, 1 to 5,600. So if you were to compare that to time, think about your life in a given 24-hour period, 1 day. That is the equivalent of 15 years and 5 months worth of days. There's a big difference between 1 and 5,600 days. Think about 15 years of your life, 15 and a half years of your life versus 1 day of your life. That's the difference between taking through the intake system and actually. So that's the first tidal exchange in a 24-hour period. Then it goes from low tide to high tide, and we withdraw the same water back from the ocean back into the bay, adding 17 billion 105 gallons. Or would have been that since we are withdrawing water. A little bit extra is added to make up for that difference. So 17 billion 8. And then that cycle happens again, and then almost happens again. That last cycle. The moon sun rotational differences, not that cycle there. So that gives you a little bit of context. And that leads to an important concept here of makeup. So as water is coming from the ocean into the bay during the exchange of low tide and high tide, as 17 billion gallons enters the bay on an incoming tide, 3 million gallons are with the water entering the bay is increased to the exact amount that is withdrawn. And that water is called makeup because it makes up for the water that's withdrawn. And it is, like I said before, a very, very small portion. That makeup water has biological activity that is potentially at the equivalent levels of intake water. So the impact of biological activity may be mitigating for it, but be aware that the water we take out of the system will be made up for with additional water. Then the same thing is, well, true of the inverse. Then there's retention water. So as water is leaving the bay from high tide to low tide, and 17 billion gallons is leaving the bay on an outgoing tide, that's 3 million gallons withdrawn. The amount of water leaving the bay is slightly reduced, and that reduction is retention water, but it doesn't leave the bay that otherwise would have. And that retention water has biological. It would have left the bay, but it's staying potentially at the equivalent levels of intake water. We're still. So let's talk about our impact minimization strategies. Yes.
Phase 3, and or in any of the phases, how often will the intakes improve? Especially in the early phases.
Phase 1 and 2, phase 3 maximum. We're permitted to go up. Yeah, what I'm about to show is really important. That is low velocity through the screens.
Additional question, are you also assuming that the activity of the retention water differentiating or no?
So if we zoom in on the site here, this is the RMT2 intake, but these two are both designed in the same way, so this makes. So the intakes will be right here in this location. They are right there. Place pumps. Just be aware that this is the flow direction of incoming tide. And pay attention to that angle right there. You'll see that again. So this is a diagram looking down. There is that angle. This is looking down. This is the existing dock. We zoom in. This is the existing pumps on the dock. And that's the intake screens down below suspended in the deck. So there's the pumps and the sea chest is down below that. So if you're standing on the deck, the sea chest would be down below you. There's a pipe down in the water that goes to the screen. And this type. And if you were standing on the dock, there's the sea chest down underneath of it. So you've got the sea chest. Back to this, we're looking. And if you look at this screen from the side, it would be circled. This is a cylinder. And it looks like this, and I can pass this around to you. So this is the surface of the screen. And the openings on that screen there are 1 millimeter. And each of you have a highlighter in front of you. And if you look at the eye in the standard for these screens, the California standard is 1.75 millimeters. So our project exceeds the requirement. All right, so the whole cylindrical screen is wrapped in that. And there are a number of published empirical studies, peer-reviewed studies that talk about why these cylindrical screens entrain for fish, which just be aware that there are a lot of peer-reviewed studies that value that screen system out there. It's so you've got your sea chest and pipe, and then that screen. And here's another schematic diagram. So there's about the water surface. And if we look at this from front on, there is the existing dock, there's the sea chest, there is the screen. If we look at it from the side, there's the dock, the sea chest, there's the screen. So water gets drawn through that screen, through the pipe, into the chest, and then there are 2 pipes in there. Realize that this existing, or the cylindrical screen replaces an existing screen there that's a fuller style, and it's at an invert elevation of -500 feet below the water surface, and that's about 11 feet. It's right in the middle. So this diagram is not perfect because our project doesn't have these legs that hold it up effectively to give you an idea of what this looks like. So if this was an open pipe, water would just flow directly into it as it was intaking water. And that would have a pretty high velocity and it would entrain fish. Instead, it's got these cones on the outside so that water, as the tide is going in one direction or another, is diverted around the screen. And then it's got the intake slots that there on the screen. So the water is diverted around it and water is screens system at a velocity of 0.2 feet per second. When you drink through a straw, you're drinking 30 per second. So very low velocity. You hold your hand in front of the screen. Very, very low velocity. And again, this is perpendicular to 5 to 4. That study that I flashed up earlier has this diagram here. And it's pretty complex particle physics, but talking about how different pressure densities are created because of that cone, the way the intake stream works. So that you've got neutral buoyant particle path like and it would be pushed away from the screen. There's a lot of detail about this, but effectively what it says is particles such as fish with inertia tend to be deflected more than water. This is reasonable evidence that small fish drifting towards the nose deflected by the wave and not. This is designed explicitly to. So minimization measures, to simplify this, the orientation, perpendicular tidal flow, the depth in the middle of the water, the cones, the screens, and the velocity are all designed in combination to minimize. So let's talk about impingement versus entrainment. I'm not going to read all of this. More or less just going to simplify this by saying we don't need to worry about impingement, which is when a fish gets stuck against the screen. Water velocity is so strong that they get sucked up against it. Intakes such as the one proposed almost entirely eliminating any effects due to. Here's a real life example of this actually place. So these little guys are larval fish swimming against the intake screen in a different project. And this is a video. So this is a grab of just one frame of that video of these fish swimming around the screen. And this particular screen is a 2 millimeter opening, 2 millimeter openings with a half-foot flow, feet per second flow velocity. Our project has half of that screen opening, less than half of that flow velocity. And these little guys are not being impinged or entrained. Just be aware that our flow velocity is less and our screen size is small. So we don't have to worry about it. Entrainment is when small planktonic organisms, including eggs and larvae of fishes, which are theoplankton, vertebrates, pass through the screens into the system. I'm showing you here that's likely, especially earlier. And 1 millimeter is really small. So each of you is provided with a highlighter. There's one here on the podium. There, the I in highlighter is here. The I is in Sharpie. I in highlighter, very, very small. So that is an example. That little guy there, the larval longfin smelt at 5.5 millimeters. You can see that little guy could fit in there. Sideways, his head capsule is not so big that he can fit through. But by the time they get to 15 millimeters, their head capsule is too large to fit through. There's something else worth noting here is there's published peer-reviewed data regarding longfin smelt larva salinity. Longfin smelt breed in brackish freshwater further up tributaries of Humboldt Bay. And there's evidence that any larvae that end up reaching our intake systems are going to be dead due to salinity. But we're still mitigating. There's a lot of information here to say that early larvae would not tolerate this. This was the seawater. And there's research papers on this, including lab studies. We're still mitigating, just be aware that very low probability that if it needs to take train into our system, they would not be. All right, evaluation of potential impacts to some moments. So there's been a concern that intake screen or intake system will intake food for special studies species such as salads. So again, remember our 1 millimeter opening here. This is 123 millimeters, so no chance that any salmonids that are passing as a naturalist species, by the time they're passing our screens, they're too large to be trained or managed. But there's concern that their food sources might be diminished because of the so cohos, salmon, smolts, this is all information. Say anything, just jump in and help me out. Cohos, salmon, smolts spend less time in lower brackish estuary, average of 1 to 12 days. Creating and there's a lot of published research. This was attached to your staff report. But just some determinations of the effects of this. The amount of water removed by the sea chest is insignificant relative to the volume and time of exchange. Tidal exchange will rapidly move large past the screens during and juvenile salmonids migrate quickly, just a couple of days past their screens. So food sources, it's very limited. They also preferentially consume resources that are larger than what is being treated in the system. Treatment of smaller prey inside the bay is not likely to happen. And then finally, there is a low probability of juveniles occurring. So it's unlikely. Area of production foregone is a term used to loss of biology. So it's that illustration, very close to the end here. So Appendix P to the CEQA document is a resource on this. And looking at area of production for species, this is greatly studied. CEQA document determines this is less than significant, but there is compensatory restoration. And John Steinbeck is here with us. He's done a pretty extensive study by sampling through the intake system to understand the type of language that could be treated. And there is a model that I'm not going to go into detail, though we can go back to that quickly. Restoration is pile removal at the site known as Kramer Dock. So appendix N goes into the detail of this. And there's a technical memorandum that goes into details about that. I'll just tell you that we were talking about removing 988 piles, 151 cross beams. These are older creosote soaked piles that total 308 tons of creosote soaked wood being removed today, which have great biological. That's the mitigation. That's what the site is. Taking a little too long here, so I'm going to blast past this by just saying that pile removal is recognized in a lot of locations as being a great way to mitigate projects to improve the ecology of the day. Back to this. So just be aware that I've got a lot of information there if you've got questions. San Francisco Bay has published a lot of studies on this, putting a lot of effort into it, as is the state of Washington. So same thing. All right, finally, district permit and conditions of approval. There are standard conditions of approval and special conditions of approval. I'm just going to tell you that the special conditions of approval lock into place everything I presented to you about approach velocities, screen opening materials, screen painting, structure placements, and then phasing. And including where I started with staff recommendations, I recommend that you adopt the resolution, which would thereby certify the EIR.
Just
I was gonna ask if you could just guess if there was any, that all of this was accurate to the city submitted and if there was anything to do with it. Yeah.
I think that'd be fun. Sharon, come to the microphone, tell us who you are. And where you live. Well, that's probably a better one.
I just. Is everybody? You've been in the Bay a lot? Think that's also didn't say that the screen will be cleaned automatically with jets of air and water. Right?
Yeah, there's two. There's an automatic brush and jets of bubbles. So it's a sensor inside the intake screen. What the flow velocity is. If the flow velocity is
It's important because if you think about that screen, if it gets clogged with big grass around one end of it during the time, this is going to accelerate the intake of water. Another part of the screen, save them in the road, so this part of the things is very water, really pieces. The other thing I would mention is one year you mentioned that absolutely most fish eggs are one thing bigger, good, but probably more facing the computational fluid dynamics of it. But larvae are long and skinny and they have big hairs in their head.
Well, commission.
Yeah. I use them. So I think it's the Tamara report and Bob is to speak to. It very much provides a conservative potential. Or basically says it's a certain size, it's too big to get through the screen. Really looking at everything that might go in that probably isn't going to go in, but could works around that screen, and likely that as they get bigger, there's a very conservative population. The smallest larvae, for one thing, are tiny. Yes, they're pretty massive. They still do swim. They still change their location in the water. They do think, I mean, just massive. Plus, yeah, the bigger they get, the less being trained to the screens. Zero report is really important to keep in mind that conditions are pretty overestimating. Yes.
You mentioned Dungeness.
Yeah, Dungeness. Dungeness are they're pretty big and pretty, pretty active. They're coming in the bay. we will have.
Where, were there any recommendations that you had in
I think that the main thing I guess I would say is that the pile removal is, one of those things that everybody wants to see done. I think it's a good mitigation. I think the screens, the estimates on the screens again are probably an overestimate of the impact. So I think all in all, to me, it seems like a good balance, if we will, for the mitigation. And again, long-term smelter is something that's different. And that'll be mitigated compensatory restoration in another area of the bed. So,
This may also be a question for John Steinbeck. Looking at the location of the intakes around the bay, is there anything particular about that habitat or those depths that would make you think that the propensity or the volume of larvae of longfin smelt, for example, would be higher there than other parts of the bay in general? Are they kind of spread out in general around the bay, or do they have specific pockets that we may be intersecting with?
So really briefly, and I don't want to take up a ton of time, but longfin smelt, Rob alluded to this, that they spawn in pressure, brackish, low salinity habitat, and that kind of rearing habitat in Humboldt Bay there's not a lot of it, right? It's been dike, levied, et cetera, et cetera. And so, the thinking is that if the bay was back to wetlands and the way it was, we'd have a very different scenario. Probably those larvae are actually literally being washed, if you will, down into parts of the bay that they wouldn't choose to be if they had the habitat that they would reside in, which has higher residence time, lower, transport potential. And so I don't think that the pumps are necessarily located in a place that I don't want to be anthropomorphic, but I'm going to say that larvae would want to be. It's not rearing habitat.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Not for long smelt, maybe for other species that are more salinity tolerant.
Sure, yeah, I mean, a lot of the species that are the goby, there's a lot of gobies and things like that, they're marine species. Yeah, that's a different situation, but the longfin smelt definitely are very brackish, more fresh oriented than the salinities that we see at the pumps, where the pumps would be.
Are there species of concern, whether they're ESA listed or not, that are in higher concentrations around the areas of these intakes than they might be in other parts of the bay? I know that may be a difficult question to answer, but just let's say the likelihood of them being present.
So there are mudflat species, especially gobies, they're super mudflat oriented, but there's no shortage of mudflat habitat throughout the bay. So there's no reason to think that that's like a hot spot for any species particularly.
Okay, thank you.
Any questions?
Thank you, Dr. Kramer. Appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Dr. Stein? Steinbeck? Is he?
John,
Yep.
can you hear?
Yeah, I was having trouble over the computer, but I'm on my phone. So can you hear me?
Can you hear us?
Yes.
To add to what Dr. Kramer just you say no?
We're not hearing you now, so I don't know if you had anything to add or not.
No, can you hear me? Hello? Okay, yeah, no, I agree with Sharon on all the points she made. as Rob said earlier, it's likely that the longfin smelt that we collected were washed down there, and they're either in osmotic stress or already dead due to the salinity levels in the area of the intake.
Thank you.
Thanks, John. So I'm gonna bring it back to the board. Any questions, comments for staff and motion?
One comment I would make in reference to the importance of mitigation of pilings. I actually did a dive job when we took the pilings out of the Coast Guard station ramp for their original lifeboats. They're nasty. I could not, I actually threw the wetsuit away after the job. This stuff is just still clinging to those pilings after I don't know how many years. So it'd be great to get those out of the bay.
I just want to go back to one thing. I think you mentioned the Tenero report was available on our website on what date? Early May, you said.
Yeah, around May 3rd, you know the exact date, Chris?
I believe it was
May 4th.
published on our website and updated on May 2nd and 4th.
And then, any other all other documentations, were they, made available in the appropriate, timeframes and?
A lot of our project description relies on the EIR and its attachments, which exceed 1,000 pages, which was available to the public way back in August. And then all of our project description and attachments were made available this past Friday, which is, the requirement is 72 hours before this meeting.
Then I'll make a motion that we adopt resolution 2023-12. By number only. Can I do that, or do I have to read the whole thing?
You can say read by title only.
Read by title only, no.
And we should go to public comment first.
Okay, well, can I make a
We
motion
can
and
take a
then go to
motion first
public?
and then, motion second, and then we.
Yeah, before we vote on it.
We haven't even finished talking at the board level.
Yeah.
I have a motion, a second,
I'll second.
so a motion is second. Any comments, questions?
I have a whole slew of questions. Pun intended, I suppose. Let me start with Rob. So I'm just also reading, some of the letters from Scott Fraser, Allison, Willie, SRF, et cetera. And so I just want to address a few questions based on points made in there. One, there's been some concerns that it's not time to certify CEQA because permits haven't yet been received, although it's been my experience in general that oftentimes CEQA precedes, final permits and conditions of permits. Is that typically, you gave us a little bit of the timeline. Is that what's expected in this project?
Yeah,
That
and
final
maybe,
permits will come after CEQA?
or maybe our district council can verify this, but yes, it's typical to do sequel first and then the permits, local, state, and then federal.
And we also know that, this project has changed, has changed in terms of the area that Nordic Aqua Farms are intending to use in the terrestrial side. I know we're more focused on the state waters and the intakes, for our purpose of discussion. And that's the species that they may raise, has changed as well. Do you consider those, Rob, to be like significant changes in the project description, or those ever-changing details that happen in a dynamic commodity industry like this that will never really have the full picture of a project description? That's our closest estimation, or do you think that those changes have been significant enough for us to revisit?
I think I missed the first part of your question.
Should we revisit the project description under CEQA based on the kinds of changes that have happened? Are they significant enough?
Which changes?
The amount of land being used by Nordic.
I see.
The
changes in
species of fish that they plan on growing, those kinds of changes that we've been hearing about.
So CEQA analyzes 17 different impact categories: air quality, traffic, things like that. Aesthetics, noise. changing a fish species doesn't change any of the impact categories, doesn't change any of the impacts, doesn't change any of the mitigation, so I would say no. The project hasn't changed. It's as though we were permitting a brewery. And now instead of making beer, they're making, instead of making IPA, they're making ale, right? But it's still a brewery, they still use the same amount of water, they still have the same building height. They have the same traffic patterns, so I would say the project hasn't changed. Species that they're raising has changed, but that's not a change in the project as far as permits and CEQA go.
I got it. This will be my last question for you. I've been around the block a number of times around CEQA and NEPA processes and mitigations. And it's fairly common to see off-site, out-of-kind mitigation, which this CEQA analysis is proposing for mitigations. Is that common? Or given the scope of project, are there in-kind and on-site mitigations that we're missing opportunities for in your opinion?
So where we're permitting out of kind is that our impacts are to open water habitat in the middle of the water column, out in the navigation channel right next to it. But where we're mitigating is really actually high quality essential fish habitat. And by removing all of these piles, we'll be creating more eelgrass essential fish habitat. So it's uncommon to mitigate out of kind if you are impacting a really high quality habitat, and then you're creating low quality habitat. That's not likely. We're doing the inverse. We're impacting low quality habitat, open water that doesn't service a lot of habitat, and we're creating very high quality habitat. So I don't know if that answers your question.
It does. Thank you. I appreciate just clarifying that.
And we are also mitigating for longfin smelt impacts by creating habitat that they actually live in, and we're impacting habitat that their larvae do not live in. So it's not even out of kind, I would say. We're not even impacting their habitat, but we're creating habitat for them.
Is that the Bay Street property?
That's correct.
And then here's my question for Chris Mickelson, our deputy director. Oftentimes when CEQA is being certified, there's always some people who didn't have adequate time or were late to the party or whatever reasons, they didn't get adequate time to have the kind of review that they would like to have. At the beginning of Rob's presentation, he said this is something that we could continue until next meeting if needed. Is there a downside in terms of other issues around this project where we're on a critical path timeline where that's something we wouldn't want to consider at this time?
We provided it as an alternative action that could be taken tonight. Clearly, this is a project, as Rob pointed out in his staff report, we've been chasing these permits for some time, both as a district and then with the complement of a very eager operation to come on board. So we have two responsibilities, or actually we have many responsibilities. Specific to this is to complete the work that's being done, and also commitments that are made both transactionally and publicly with an entity that wants to enter our market. We have to look at this twofold. So I'm sure the folks at Nordic Aqua Farms who are co-applicant on this would like this certified. They'd like this to move forward. With that said, we understand that there's a community that has concern and interest. We have a responsibility to them as well. So we've offered an alternative recommendation. Ultimately, that will lie in the decision of the board this evening. Staff's recommendation is that the approval move forward, but we are prepared to give this continuation if that is what's found to be the appropriate action.
Thank you. That's all my questions for now.
Thank you, Commissioner. That's some good questions. Commissioner Coleman.
I asked my questions and made my motion.
Commissioner Newman?
Like your component?
Yeah, I'm glad that Sharon said what she said about habitat and the habitat that we need in Humboldt Bay for longfin smelt is is mixing zone, low speed, mixed zone habitat that we just don't have. The new project on Elk River is a good start. Our project on Bay Street will be another of those sorts of habitat restoration projects. I think will have an impact on their river habitat. Any longfin smelt that are at that end of the bay at that side are dead. I mean, they're just automatically can't handle it. So I'm in favor as well. So I take it to the public. Anybody in the public care to speak? Please step to the microphone. You have 3 minutes. Tell your name, where you're from.
Thank you, Chairman Dale. Scott Frazier, Blue Lake. As Rob's presentation indicated, and if you've taken the time to look at the report, there's a fairly intricate, complex series of graphic and mathematical things that you need to know to understand this project. So as you see from the email, thank you for forwarding that, Chris. That I say, is I'm requesting that you continue this discussion to a date certain as your staff has offered as an alternative to your July meeting. Because the final EIR that you're referring back to is the county's EIR, which is in litigation in Superior Court in Humboldt County. There's a number of flaws that I won't bore you with today, but things have changed. So there's a couple of things you need to look at. Nordic is going to produce less metric tons of fish, a different species. You're going to need less water. So there are changes that are interesting, and you can decide for yourself whether or not they're substantial. But the project description needs to be modified. Otherwise, it's not the project that's been permitted. It's a different project. And if you can believe the public announcements that are covered well in the local press, the information's there. So the Harbor District, second point that was made, will be receiving requests for the public to become notified when you post things on your website. Most of us don't go to your website every day or even every month, but I made repeated efforts with various agencies and your executive director to find out when this report would come out. And I wasn't notified. So a friend brought me a heads up yesterday at 10 o'clock in the morning, and I really appreciate that. But I spent most of today reading your Tenera report. It's really good reading, really good work. But a lot of people who are interested don't want to come here and speak at the podium. They were relying on the owl to hear the discussion they couldn't hear tonight. Another reason why you should carry this forward to a date certain. Both the final EIR and Rob referred to existing structures at the intake sites. Those existing structures have been defunct for a decade. They are not functional. They are not appropriately screened. It would be illegal to suck water up at those two diversion points. So it's really a misnomer to describe those as existing structures, except for the concrete and maybe the pipeline on that line onshore. They're not going to be useful. It's entirely new material, new pump, new intakes, and this new screen, which is quite nice. So the public, if they weren't knowledgeable on the details, hadn't been spending the last 2.5 years following the machination that this commission has gone to try to get permits, they wouldn't know that. But your staff led Nordic to believe that you were going to get the permits for the intake 2.5, 3 years ago. Didn't happen. It didn't happen because the application was incomplete until you submit this report to the Coastal Commission. This was contracted 1 year ago, December. So there's some reasons why this is complex and hard to understand. But I have to point out that May 29th of 2020, your commission was notified by SHN that when possible, intake should be located offshore. That would resolve a lot of these issues if the intake was located offshore, as NOAA and National Marine Fisheries have recommended to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments on this item?
Good evening, Josh Garcia, Pile Drivers Union, Northern California. I just like to make a quick comment on hopefully that I advise oversight on the power removal. Because some companies, as they do it, will do it clamshell bucket style, which tears at the mud line and leaves a lot behind underneath, which can secrete a lot of that creosote that I work with it. It'll burn you up and give you chemical burns on your skin and all this stuff. So making sure that the company that takes care of it, or the contractor, uses personnel to rig it and pull it completely out or vibrate it out, within the fish window, of course, the pile season, so.
Train
Just
with
one.
divers.
Yeah, possibly divers. I've done it before from the surface, right, from skiff. So, especially if they're older and they're still stout, they slip right out. So, yeah, that's all. Thank you.
Thanks, Josh. Thank you.
Hi, Jen Call, Humboldt Baykeeper. Oh, Aaron, I looked it up, 4 millimeters are the crab megalops. 4 millimeters long.
Answer register.
So I agree, removing piles is gonna be a great thing. We should be doing a lot more of that, not just waiting for it to be mitigation for a project, but getting grant money to do it. I have not spent enough time with this information either. It's pretty dense, lots of information. I do have some questions. I don't know if you guys already know the answer to these questions, but I was looking at the Coastal Commission's letter from June 2nd, which is basically saying that there's not enough information about the mitigation at this stage. And so the project application is still regarded as incomplete by the Coastal Commission because there's outstanding discussions that need to happen about the mitigation. And so I think I do not see any downside to giving another 30 days for the public to review these really complex documents. I would appreciate it. And it's not going to go to the Coastal Commission in July. So I don't know that it will be any skin off anybody's back to delay it. But the other question I have, besides what the mitigations will be and how, I'm not really clear on how you can certify a CEQA document when you don't know the mitigation measures. That's kind of odd to me, but this whole CEQA process is a little unclear. But the other thing the letter says is that the report's area of potential effects is based on 50% confidence level rather than the required 95% level that's required in the State Water Board Ocean Plan. I don't know about you. I have no idea what that means. And perhaps John Steinbeck or Sharon Kramer can explain that. Or maybe you already understand, but the Coastal Commission's letter says if the 95% required confidence level were to be used, the mitigation would be approximately 30 acres rather than 17.9 acres. Like I said, I haven't really had enough time to dig into all this and fully understand what that means and how it would go from 17.9 acres to 30 acres, but it would be really helpful to understand all that before approving this. So thanks.
Thanks, Jen.
Hello, everybody. I'm Cody Freitas with the Operating Engineers Local 3, member of the Humboldt County and Delmar Building Trades. I would like to reiterate what our pile driver friend said about the retention and capture of that material when it's coming out. That is an issue, and so that knowing about that mitigation is really awesome to hear. And in regards to the operating efficiency and capacity of the metric volumage coming in through that pond, with you guys planning with Nordic reducing their size and having a system that could facilitate an increase or other aquaculture farms coming in, I think is a good idea and allow us to have that sustainability and growth. And I think the board is being proactive thinking in that direction and not just having a system that would need to be retrofitted or modified if that ever increased. And that's all I got. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Ben. Anyone else care to speak on this item? Seeing none, I'm gonna bring it back to the board. Any other comments, questions? Well,
Okay, then.
Yeah, so first question, are you okay?
Yeah, I'm okay.
Yeah, I have another question that's less about the intake and more about the discharge. And, I get different things from reading the reports and the EIR. One is that the water discharged back into the bay is going to be some of the cleanest water ever discharged back into the bay.
No discharge in the bay, or without alcohol.
Sorry, alcohol. And I was wondering about, the SRF, Salmon Restoration Federation, they had certain concerns about the discharge treatment. And, they raised two aspects of the treatment, but they were concerned about the viral load, on this, and they felt that ozone treatment should be a component that's included in the treatment for ocean discharge, just in this concern about passing on, viral loads to salmonids that are in the ocean or other species in general. And so I'm just curious about that. It's a lingering question from you. Is the treatment adequate?
I don't know about the treatment, but I can tell you that ozone and saltwater it's not a good treatment in saltwater. We're great freshwater, does not in saltwater. It creates bromines, and bromines are probably harder than the viral one. So that's my understanding. With ozone. UV, would certainly UV the hell out of everything, will kill most everything, including any viral load. And so I think that's the way they're addressing it with UV. Filtration and UV.
Okay, good to know. Thanks.
Right?
Well,
Go ahead, please.
and reading this and then listening to the reports and, the experts, I really feel that the impact of this project is, we're looking at the worst possible impact, and even at the worst possible impact is pretty minimal, and the mitigation that we're then doing for this is an overall improvement in habitat for the bay by a long shot. And so, I totally get what Jen was saying about it'd be great if, we could just do things like pile removal and stuff on grants because it's the right thing to do. But when every agency makes you find mitigation measures for every blade of eelgrass that you move, there's a limited amount of mitigation measures that we can do. And so it's hard to because that's the process that's been set up, it kind of makes it against an agency's interest to go out and do good things because that you're going to be forced to do them on a 4-to-1 or greater effort all the time. And so it's I don't know if that's technically a catch-22, but it's something that's not good and something like an unintended consequence of the regulations. But the potential of creating better habitat and better off-channel habitat and more brackish water, I think is wonderful. I think, the idea that we would be doing that and then working on getting these pilings out. I totally agree with the commenters that, it's important that we make sure it's done correctly by skilled personnel. So I don't really see any reason to delay this further. And it seems to me that we met all the requirements of the publishing of the reports and everything. And so I'm in favor of just moving forward with this at this time.
I tend to agree. I have some questions about the discharge, this is about the intake. So,
All right, so we've heard from the audience, we've heard from the board. I'm gonna call the question. All in favor, please signify.
It's a roll call.
Oh, it is a roll call, it's a resolution.
Can I make one more comment before
Please.
before voting? Yeah, I completely support the Nordic Aqua Farms project. I'm so excited. In fact, I saw Natalie Arroyo's slides of her recent trip. And I can't wait till we have that here and then we're addressing, needs for terrestrial based, marine proteins and so on and so forth. There's I can't say enough good about it. I also want there to be as much equity and opportunity to maximize public participation, in this as well. And from my perspective,
And this has been going on for a number of years, a month this way or that, doesn't appear to be a deal breaker. In this, so to the degree that we can continue to a date certain of July 13th, is something that I would support.
Okay. So we have a motion and a second on the table to pass this tonight. Anybody care to change their motion in a second? Seeing that, I will call the. I will ask Chris to call the question.
Commissioner Coleman,
Yes.
Commissioner Newman,
Yes.
Commissioner Benson,
No.
and President Dale.
Yes. All right, motion passes. We are moving on to item 11A. Review of preliminary budget goals for conservation programs, recreation programs, and tidelands.
Okay, so we're gonna take a look at the budget goals, and remember, this is an information item tonight. Board can choose to provide direction to staff, certainly, we're prepared to discuss. This is just a kind of a teaser slide, if you will. We've been continuing to share this. Obviously, we're going through each one of the different areas in our budget. Just so you know, on June 22nd, which will be a special meeting, we plan to bring the preliminary budget forward in its entirety. And there are a couple of items, administrative services, fees, and staffing that is looked at on that time. That was actually scheduled to be a portion of tonight, but it's actually part of the overall preliminary budget. So for conservation, recreation, and tidelands, these are the proposals for next year. Shoreline patrols and debris removal. We do a lot of shoreline patrol. We spend a great deal of time in our vessels, on our feet, sometimes by calls that citizens make, and a lot of volunteers. And we do remove a lot of debris that find their way to the shore of Humboldt Bay. We have a lot of support in this from other property owners around the bay. We have a lot of support from the marine operators on the bay. But this cost is increasing. In years past, I've included this in just overall trash removal, but it's something that we really are picking up on right now. It seems to be an area of high activity. That's good. A lot of it's recreation. Unfortunately, a large part of it is not. So we're proposing $7,500 for shore patrol and debris removal. And when I say patrol, this is not law enforcement. This is our staff walking the shores and using our motorboats to look at those areas in and around Humboldt Bay.
Does that include the ponds?
Yes, yes. Actually, no. The ponds are covered under road and regional 1.
Okay.
Forgive me. And king salmon is different. The recreation portion of king salmon isn't here, but I had items on king salmon when we looked at fields land earlier in the budget process.
Okay.
Recreation conservation projects. We haven't had a great deal of funds in these in the years past because we've had a very trim budget. It's interesting to me that our administrative service director, Mindy Hiley, our director of development, Rob Holman, and myself have all had this dream about a trail around Lily Island. So we're not ready for that, but we want to start looking at things, options, and really focus on our recreation projects. We have a kayak launch here at Humboldt Bay that's very heavily utilized. There's a couple of grant opportunities we're looking at, but of course there's matching funds and there's some reports and works that we'll need to do to consider those. And so there's a $12,000 number placed there. And then in tidelands, really the most of this comes into our vehicles. So we have the Port Authority vessel, which is our big work boat that we use all the time. It's in exceptional condition because of the amount of effort that's put in by our maintenance staff. So $5,000 for annual maintenance there. It's typically pulled out of the water no less than once a year, but typically twice. And then our fireboat. I think Commissioner Newman, our fireboat liaison, mentioned this earlier tonight. He was asking us to open our wallets. We've been progressively increasing this budget over the years. This year, we need to spend $40,000 on the fireboat for very needed repairs and maintenance. Our vessel is past a decade, and while it's maintained, there are things on it that outlived a useful life would be the best way to explain that. And technology changes, so some of the things that we would repair by just replacing one, we end up replacing two. When you are in service operations, we cannot have, or we can, but it's very difficult to have one controller for one device and a completely different controller for another device. In this particular case, we're talking about onboard items that help us to operate firefighting equipment on the boat. That's the sole budget right there on that, $64,500. I do want to remind everybody that we do get money and income into this fund through not only some of the leases that we have, but we have HSU ports that we participate in. In fact, we'll be going out on the water Monday to change equipment at the Chevron dock. And so we do have some extra revenues there that we try to focus solely on the vessels in our tugboats. And it's that simple. This is an easy one compared to some of the other projects out there. So those are our proposals, and we're looking forward to this being an integral part of our 23-24 budget.
Questions?
Deputy Director Mickelson, I'm looking at that number, $12,000, and I'm reading the title above your heads, Humboldt Bay Harbor Recreation and Conservation District, and I'm seeing recreation and conservation budget at $12,000, but I know that's not the true budget. I know that there's mitigation happening for Spartina, for Caltrans. I mean, I know that's really a lowball number compared to the amount of money that's actually going through the Harbor District towards recreation and conservation. So I don't want to give you a hard time over that number. What's the real number? Or I'd like to see this presentation sort of reworked. I'd like to kind of know what that real number is.
So when we bring back the entire preliminary budget to you, which again, we were planning to do on the 22nd of June, special meeting, will be a little more overview, less categorical. For example, the amount of money expended to support Woodley Island, not all of that is recreation, but a great portion of it is. We have almost an entire dock here that houses a charter boat. We have a kayak launch. We have a fish cleaning station here on Woodley Island. We have an embarcadero that's actively walked. It's probably hard to really go and do what I would call a letter out to every single expense.
Yeah.
But just in maintenance operations, it's in excess of $100,000 a year. I would probably be willing to put my nose out there a little bit and say I think it's about $112,000. Because we do monitor these. We exercise such strong expense control that we're looking at on a recurring basis. So it's a little bit in excess of $100,000. About 4 years ago, we started mowing a portion of king salmon. We went through and looked at the native plants that were there, made sure we didn't have anything that we would endanger. We created a huge recreation area there. The beauty of that is we're able to maintain that for a couple $1,000s per year. But we send 2 staff members down there twice a week to empty trash cans, to maintain trails, to replace signage, to remove debris that are out in the dune areas themselves, to interact with people riding motorcycles out in the dunes that shouldn't be. So it is quite significant. And I think if we look at the amount of actual labor that's put into it, that number will grow. But I'd be happy to take a deep dive into that this coming week and be prepared to give you a little better shot what it is globally, because you're right, it's pretty significant. In fact, it's a very large part of our budget.
It'd be pretty difficult. We're working on a $22 million eelgrass, grants, $7 million Spartina removal grants. Parse restoration out of everything we do, but out to a lot that's not accounted for that way.
And it's not accounted, some of those projects are multi-year projects, right? Or they're project triggered rather than fiscal year triggered.
Yeah.
But it's important to recognize what Rob mentioned, because Rob in particular, working on some very large projects. We have the Spartina removal project that we're partnering with Caltrans and RCAA, and that's a very large scale project, and there's more coming our way.
It might be, just, off of what Commissioner Benson was saying, maybe not a dollar amount, but, putting some publicity or a report out every once in a while on the conservation projects or the other things that we do, because sometimes maybe the point of view from some of the public is all we're doing is trying to develop things and wreck habitat. And, I'm not sure that people know like the amount of effort and work that goes into restoration projects, and, whether they're mandated mitigation projects or grants that we've helped acquire from agencies to make things happen. We can still talk about pulp mills that we cleaned up, but
Or property required to engage in the public.
Yeah,
I mean,
and
capacity
so
is awesome.
I guess all I'm saying is it might be nice every once in a while to put out some reports like that for the public to know. And from my own day job, I'm realizing, you know, that sometimes we talk about things so much internally and we think, you know, how come we don't get any credit for it is because we don't tell anybody about it. And, you know, nobody knows what we're doing. And so I think that might be valuable.
A portion of the $12,000 in recreation and conservation projects actually is for us to take a look at not only a summary, but a signage project that really not only denotes the natural resources around us, but also the efforts that's put into them. To complement what you said, you know, last meeting I reported in one of the photographs was a newspaper article in the Union newspaper in Arcata. I know it's not what it's called any longer, but I still call it what is it? The Mad River?
The Mad River
Union, thank you. This is staff going out to a slough that isn't necessarily in our management boundary, but it's important to the waters of the bay and it's important to the ecology around this area and the environment. And so we went out and removed a great deal of scrap metal and debris and cutting liquids that were, you know, left behind. We reported the time before that about a Clean California program that we have out there. And so we could definitely do a better job of summarizing those things as an annual report or something along those lines. And that's what we're looking to do. There's a lot of money out there for recreation and conservation. What I want to do is I want to get some help with qualified people that will help us find grants and matching funds in some cases to participate in these programs. Because there's buckets of money out there right now. The reality is we have the ability to do it. We have the talent to do it. We don't have the time to do it. We got a lot of projects going. We have our enterprise to manage. But again, just to what you said, that is precisely where we're headed with this. So we can produce not only things that we are doing, but projects for the future and where we want to head with them. And we're pretty excited about it. Commissioner Benson's, you know, he mentioned that little sign above our head, and it is a big part of us. You hear Director Ocker mention it all the time. We are the conservation and recreation, a big part of our name. And so it's the focus of staff to get that going. Again, that's the ad that's in the budget this year. I'd love to be able to, you know, do a little bit more, but I'm worried about our overall staff capacity.
And then there's things, you know, a substantial amount of staff time goes to oil spill prevention, which is certainly a, you know, conservation activity. So, while we have 3 things in our name, we don't have 3 departments that operate independently. We're all doing those things.
Understood. I brought it up just because it's, you know, just because I think it's really, it's what you read in the newspaper now is you would think that we're all about industrial development and the jobs that come with that. And it's really easy to forget that conservation, for example, the restoration community is 1 out of 100 people. You know, Eric Escher at Cal Poly, who did the economic, basically talk about the restoration economy. How big is it in Humboldt County? It's 1 out of 100 people. When that's more people than will be employed at Nordic Aqua Farms and offshore wind energy. I mean, that's a big part of Humboldt County's economy. So it's, I don't want it to get lost. I'll get off of my soapbox.
No, I appreciate it. I wanted to give air to what you and Commissioner Coleman shared, because it is important. I think it's a big part of what we want to be doing.
And speaking of our name, I think it's been a few years since I complained about, I still think we're missing a comma in there.
Yeah, I often make that error.
Yeah.
The Oxford comb.
It's that.
It
Oxford
depends on what
comma,
spell
English
checker you
major
use.
that,
Depends on where you went to school.
They're both
That's
the
the
same.
East Coast comments, what I call it.
So this is an information only item.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
So I got a couple questions. So Aaron, $40,000 on the fireboat, what are you gonna spend that on?
The primary issue is the guns and your ability to articulate.
Guns and articulation.
Yeah, the monitors, the guns.
So we flow water through.
Anyway, currently the apparatus that electronically from the cabin, you can rotate the monitor to fight fire. Say if you've got a heavy incoming tide, for example.
No, I get why you want to articulate and what specifically on those monitors makes them
Electronic
not work.
systems that, it's a remote system that works from inside the house.
Elkhart? Yeah, currently we have an Elkhart brass system with what's known as the wet system. No-
Right.
No pun intended, that's what it's called. And it's a remote control system, as Aaron was stating, that allows us to operate the monitors from.
Are they
inside.
good? Are they the best? Is there a better kind or
We're gonna get the best.
They're non-operable, so what's happened is the electronics and the printed circuit boards on the remote receiving
they're
unit
outside?
have failed.
Okay. So,
And that current system, just for a little bit of background on this, this has been on the budget. It was brought up for repairs, it was put in the budget this year. But the challenge that we faced is the availability of product and the amount of electronic repair that has to go consistent with it. So the original thought was we would buy a couple of monitors, we would change our control system,
the cables
not a possibility.
or a van, and just put a van up there. Spray it.
So,
Your job.
Yeah,
I think we need to come out of the fire boat Friday.
that's how they do it on every other fire.
Well, to some degree, we absolutely can control the monitor flow from the vessel. That is something as an operator we can control. Remember, we're boarding, so I don't want to get too far off topic, but when we go to fight a fire, that's what we're going to do. We are not personally fighting the fire. We're operating a vessel.
Right.
As a team. Humboldt Bay Fire is bringing on their crews or the responding agency, and they're going to come on as their engineer that ultimately would sit on that side of the helm and operate those. And they would be directing us to aim the boat. Keep in mind, we have 2 monitors. If I need to be fighting fire here at 10 o'clock and I need to be fighting fire at 12 o'clock, I can't do that all on the boat. I have to have some remote control of
Sure.
those monitors,
I get
create
that.
that spread. The other benefit in a system is we can allow it to sweep, to rotate back and forth if we need to. So there's specific firefighting measures. We're not firefighters, but we train a great deal in new direction. I took over Commissioner Newman's question here, but
Well, I'm used to that. sort of-
I may not be an expert in firefighting, but I am an expert in electronics on boats,
well, we.
and they never
labor.
work very long.
Well, the circuit boards get contaminated. Here's the thing, the drills we've been doing, and I hope you guys can come by tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock at Bunny Bull Dock and check it out. I'd love to, and meet me here if you want at 8:30, we'll go over, take a ride. Right now, we're pumping 4 inches of water to this engine, to fight the fire. And if we can't articulate those monitors, I'm stuck in this position.
Right, and I get,
Them
I
water.
get the articulation part, I do. I just,
can fight
it's a
fire
little
with the brother.
frustrating to put $100,000 articulation unit on there. And then in 5 years, it's not gonna work again, because it rusted or it corroded.
Well-
And that's what's gonna happen.
So let us clarify the $40,000. So the actual cost of the monitors and the control equipment is probably in the $20,000 to $22,000 range
Each or for both.
for the pair.
Okay.
Along with the control units. There are additional funds needed to place new wiring in there that is to a higher standard than what is currently in the vessel.
Okay,
So what we have now is a lot of single strand wire. Or it's not single strand, but it's in a single casing. And there are other options to use, other grades of wire that are double encased or triple encased.
Mhm.
You know, pardon the term Romex, but marine grade Romex. That can be run in different chases in a different fashion that would prevent this from happening. We have a tower from the roof up that goes in that box, and in there we have strobe lights, we have our patrol lights, we have stage lights or scene lights, they're called search lights. We have our radar communications, we have our navigational items in there. Oftentimes, and I've been the kind of the repairman on that, mainly to my little tiny size, when I go in there to work on it, the casing the sheet is coming off the wiring. So we're chasing these things and eventually you're just getting total failures, and we're about to get to that point. And so this isn't a matter of lack of maintenance, it's just an aging issue.
well,
So I want to point out that 40,000 is for more than
Okay.
our 5-year.
my point is, and I don't wanna belabor this anymore.
Yeah, I was gonna point out that we have 2 more.
Yeah, they're both of them quick. My point is,
Public comment on this.
you're gonna get the comment on it, just relax. My God, I'm still making my point.
Let me know if you want me to hit him with the gavel.
You can't reach together. No, my point is you can put the best wire you can buy. And it's still gonna do the same thing in 10 years. So keep that in mind.
Hoping these circuit boards will be protected too, and whatnot.
Okay, all right, but I'm a huge fan of replacing all the electronics you can with cable. or a person? Sorry,
No,
just to put a handle on it, and let them go steer it with a handle, then they can articulate all different directions and. All he has to have on is a headset, and you can buy those for $9.99 at Target. Sorry, finger pointers. All right,
no, well, this is the whole purpose to have this discussion, is to answer questions, and points are well taken.
all I hear about is the fire book needs to be worked on. And it does. If the articulation doesn't work, then it's not a good fire book. Okay. Any other?
Still the crank up windows in your car, right?
Yeah, they always work.
They don't break.
They don't break. Any other comments from the board? I'm gonna take it to the public then.
All right.
Oh, gosh. Tell me about articulation.
I don't care about that, but, I really agree with what Steven said about telling the public more about what you do. And I just sat here and I went to your website, the section on conservation is pathetic. It has 3 sentences. I think that would be really cool to tell the public what you do. And I know it takes work to do that, but you know, people don't read a lot these days. Having a few pictures and links to things that are already up there are great. But what I really wanted to tell you about, in case you haven't seen it, all of the discussions about closing the books on the new market credit, what are they called? New market tax credit and paying off the Coast Seafoods loan. It got me interested in telling the story of the pulp mill because a lot of people don't know. You know, there's a lot of people who just moved here 5 years ago, 1 year ago. So on the front page of the Baykeeper website, there's an article. It's a longer version of what was in print in the Eco News, if you ever see that. And it is called Pulp Mill Legacy, How Legal Advocacy Cleaned Up Our Air and Water and Bold Government Action Averted Disaster. And that's you guys. And you may recall I sent everybody an email asking for quotes. Richard's the only one who gave me a quote. So
I never saw an email from you.
well, you don't read my email, so. Anyway, it's an interesting article that tells the story starting from the beginning of the pulp mills being built, the Surfrider EPA lawsuit, and then I try to go through, I mean, it was a short article, but anyway, if you want to poach it for your new website on all the great conservation work that you're doing, you're free to have a link on there. But I hope you like the article, and if you want to give me a quote, I can put it in anytime. But, you know, Richard was really the one, I remember Richard being so adamant about acquiring that pulp mill, and people really thought it was a terrible idea, and a lot of the commissioners were very reluctant. And so I thought it was appropriate anyway that he got quoted in there, so.
Good.
Anyway, I hope you like it, read it, link it to your website.
Oops. Yeah, thank you. I noticed that article. I read it.
You read
and
it?
I appreciate it. Yeah.
Cool.
And yeah, I did. Maybe since I wasn't on the board when we bought the, well, you weren't looking for a quote from me, but I don't remember getting an email from you either about it. I can check.
I thought I emailed everybody, but.
Text me next time. I'll give you a quote.
All right, anybody else care to comment on this item? Anybody know where the comment is supposed to go? All right, so we're done with that one. Let's move on to item B, consider adopting resolution 2023-10, a resolution to authorize the execution of a grant agreement and accept funds from the California Department of Fish and Wildlife for Secretariat Services for the Harbor Safety Committee and the Humboldt Bay area for fiscal year 2023-2024.
You can go a second. So I'll second, and I think the Harbor Safety Committee is great. We should do this. This is the thing we do every year. So was I. I think I would be happy if we just take public comment and move to a vote.
Anybody care to comment on this? Seeing none, I love taking money for Fish and Game. Yeah. And this is an absolute gem, so I have we've taken it to the board has discussed it, the audience has
You have a
discussed it,
motion in the second.
and I need a resolution or a roll.
Roll call vote. Okay, so Commissioner Newman,
Yes.
Commissioner Coleman,
Yes.
Commissioner Benson.
Yes.
And President Dale.
Yes.
Sorry if you had a presentation all keyed up there to convince us to do this.
I got presentation down on the last one.
All right, moving on to item C. Consider adopting resolution 2023-11, a resolution of the Board of Commissioners of the Humboldt Bay Harbor Recreation Conservation District, accepting the real property in the county of Humboldt designated as assessor parcel number 401-031-083 and authorizing the executive director and or president of the Board of Commissioners to fund and close escrow.
So moved.
Yeah, now I'll second, and
We have a motion and a second.
I'm convinced, but we probably should hear about this one.
Okay, sounds great.
Yeah,
So, staff recommendation, the board adopt the resolution. Keep in mind, this is a piece of property that we've had in escrow originally through the Humboldt Bay Development Association. It was assigned over the Humboldt Bay Harbor Recreation and Conservation District. We're now ready to close escrow. This is 35.25 acres on the small peninsula, which is immediately west of Redwood Marine Terminal 1. The district is acquiring it with the intention of developing a heavy lift marine terminal. So the item is in escrow, ready for closing, and we want to take the appropriate actions to complete the transaction.
yes, we do. All right, any comments, questions from the board?
A lot of work has gone into this and I got to be in on this one from near the beginning, so I don't have a bunch of questions. Just ready to vote.
Any comments from the audience?
Hello again, guys. I'd just like to say that as a local guy who lives in Humboldt, my career in construction always took me out of the area. So seeing you guys looking forward and trying to acquire this land and for prospective work for people to have jobs locally is really important to me. And just because I wasn't able to do it, I would love to see the opportunity come to hands that live here and have the opportunity to stay here with this work. So acquiring this piece of land and moving forward on that aspect is really heartening to hear. Thank you.
Thanks. Anybody else care to comment on the purchase of this piece of property? Seeing none, I'm gonna bring it back for this resolution as well, so another roll call. Any, no more comments from the board, questions from the board? Please, Chris.
Okay, Commissioner Benson,
Yes.
Commissioner Coleman,
Yes.
Commissioner Newman,
Yes.
and President Dale.
Yes,
Thank you.
please, thank you. Yay. So future agenda items, our next meeting is on the 22nd. Yeah, we just,
Has that been publicly noticed or anything?
It will be,
Okay, great.
yeah, we are gonna have a special meeting on the 22nd. We'll be bringing potentially 3 items. One will be the preliminary budget.
I
I
am,
know we talked about it before, but I was quick checking. Yeah, I didn't have it on my calendar, but.
Yeah, our next regular meeting will be July 13th.
and the 22nd is gonna be just this item, right? Just the.
You just said 3 items.
We try to keep it to special sessions to as few items as possible. There may be an additional item related to, well, I'm not prepared. Staff needs to work on that a little bit. We may have a couple of items that are urgent matters that we have to bring.
Okay. Okay,
Not ready to notice them as of tonight.
looking forward to it. All right, so then we are adjourned. Have a good evening, a good rest of the month.
It's a nice touch that we all get these highlighters to compare that.
Yeah, I was.